The stranger who knocked on Elena Foster's door in the middle of a snowstorm didn't look like he belonged in her world, and her two boys fell in love with him before she could even think to be afraid. Elena had been curling up on the couch with her sons, 7-year-old Marcus and 5-year-old Daniel, watching an animated movie they'd seen at least 15 times before. The knock came sharp and deliberate against the wooden door, cutting through the sound of wind howling outside. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Nearly midnight. No one came to their small house on the edge of town at midnight, especially not in weather like this. "Stay here," she told the boys, pulling her cardigan tighter around her body as she approached the door. Through the frosted glass panel, she could make out a tall figure, perfectly still despite the wind that was shaking the trees in her yard. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" The man standing on her porch didn't look cold, though he wore nothing but a white dress shirt and dark trousers. Snow had settled on his shoulders and in his hair, which fell past his shoulders in waves so pale they seemed to glow in the porch light. His skin matched his hair, a porcelain white that looked almost luminous. When he lifted his eyes to meet hers, she felt her breath catch. They were the color of winter itself, a pale blue-gray that seemed to see straight through her. "I apologize for the late hour," he said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't quite place, something old and formal. "My car broke down approximately 3 miles from here. I walked until I saw your lights. I need only to use a telephone." Elena hesitated. Everything about stranger danger screamed in her mind, but something about the way he stood there, perfectly composed and oddly vulnerable despite his imposing presence, made her reconsider. And it was a terrible storm. She had heard about people dying in weather like this. "Mommy, who is it?" Marcus appeared beside her, craning his neck to see past her legs. The stranger's gaze dropped to her son, and something flickered across his pale features. Surprise, maybe. Or pain. It was gone so quickly, Elena wondered if she'd imagined it. "A man who needs help," she said softly. Then, against her better judgment, she unhooked the chain and opened the door wider. "Come in, you must be freezing." "I do not feel the cold," he said, but he stepped inside anyway, bringing with him the scent of winter night and something else, something like old books and darker things she couldn't name. Daniel came running from the living room, skidding to a stop when he saw their visitor. His eyes went wide. "Are you a prince?" The stranger stared at the little boy for a long moment, and Elena watched as something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. "I was once," he said quietly. "A very long time ago." "What's your name?" Marcus asked, utterly fearless in the way only children could be. "My name is Hadrian Greymorn." He pronounced it with careful precision, as if the name carried weight. Then he looked at Elena, and she felt pinned by that winter gaze. "I am grateful for your kindness." She showed him to the phone in the kitchen, acutely aware that both her sons had followed them, staring at Hadrian with fascination. She should have been more concerned about having a stranger in her house, but something about him made her instincts quiet. He moved with extraordinary grace, each gesture deliberate and controlled. When he picked up her phone, he stared at it for a moment, as if uncertain how to use it. "Do you need help?" she asked. "The technology has changed," he said, and there was something rueful in his tone. "I am not as current as I should be." She showed him how to dial, trying not to think too hard about what kind of person didn't know how to use a basic phone in this day and age. He made a call, speaking in low tones in a language she didn't recognize. When he hung up, he turned to her. "Someone will come for me, but it will take time in this weather. I should wait outside." "Don't be ridiculous," Elena said before she could stop herself. "You'll freeze to death out there." "I assure you I will not." But he didn't move toward the door. "Stay and have tea at least," she heard herself saying, "until your ride comes." Marcus tugged on Hadrian's hand, and Elena watched the tall stranger go absolutely still, staring down at where her son's small fingers wrapped around his pale ones. "Will you watch the movie with us? It's about dragons." "Marcus, don't bother our guest," Elena started to say, but Hadrian was already looking at her son with an expression that made her heart ache for reasons she couldn't explain. "I would be honored," Hadrian said softly. That was how Elena Foster found herself sitting in her living room at midnight with a strange, beautiful man who claimed to be a prince, and her two sons who had apparently decided he was the most wonderful thing they'd ever seen. Daniel climbed onto the couch next to Hadrian without hesitation, chattering about the movie plot. Marcus settled on Hadrian's other side, and Elena watched as the stranger sat rigid at first, clearly unused to the casual affection of children. She made tea, bringing out a tray with cookies she'd baked earlier that day. Hadrian accepted a cup but didn't drink from it, holding it instead as if for show. She noticed he watched her sons more than the television screen, something wistful and ancient in his strange eyes. "Do you have children?" she asked quietly, settling into the armchair across from them. "I did," Hadrian said after a long pause. "Many centuries ago." Elena's breath caught. The words should have sounded insane, but they didn't. They sounded like truth, heavy and sad and impossible. "I don't understand." "I know." He met her eyes and she saw sorrow there, deep as oceans. "You have been kind to invite me into your home, Elena Foster. More kind than you know." "How do you know my name?" "Your mail," he said, gesturing to the pile of envelopes on the side table. "I have keen eyesight." The movie played on. Daniel fell asleep against Hadrian's side, and Marcus wasn't far behind. Elena should have moved them to their beds, but she found herself watching Hadrian instead, the way he gazed at her sleeping sons with such profound longing that it made her throat tight. "You look at them like they're breaking your heart," she whispered. Hadrian was silent for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "They remind me of what I lost. My sons were near their age when I was turned. I held them as they died of plague, and I could not save them. That was in 1347. I have walked this earth for nearly 700 years, and I have not allowed myself to be near children since that night. Until now." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and true. Elena should have laughed, should have called for help, should have done anything but believe him. But she looked at his ancient eyes and his too pale skin, and the way he held himself like something from another era, and she believed. "You're a vampire," she said, not a question. I am the vampire king, to be precise." He said it without pride, only weariness. "I rule my kind from the shadows of your world. I have not smiled in 600 years. I have not felt warmth or connection or anything resembling joy." And then your sons looked at me with wonder instead of fear, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Elena's hands trembled around her teacup. Should I be afraid? Probably. Hadrian looked at her fully, and she saw the monster beneath the beauty, the predator that could kill her without effort. But she also saw the grief, the loneliness, the desperate hunger for something that wasn't blood. "But I will not harm you or your children. This I swear on the graves of my lost sons." "Why did you really come here?" Elena asked. "It wasn't just about a broken-down car, was it?" Hadrian's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something attempting its shape. "No, I have territories I must inspect, ensuring my kind follow our laws. I was traveling to the next city when the storm became inconvenient. I could have continued, but I saw your lights. I saw shadows moving in your windows, small shadows, children, and after centuries of avoiding even the sight of them, I found myself walking toward your door instead of away. I do not know why." Marcus stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Hadrian's hand moved instinctively to steady him, and Elena saw the careful gentleness in that gesture, the way he cradled her son as if he were made of glass and starlight. "They need a father," Elena said quietly, surprising herself. "Their dad left 3 years ago. Decided being a parent was too hard, too limiting. He sends a card on their birthdays, but he's never visited, never called. Marcus asks about him sometimes. Daniel barely remembers him." "Then their father is a fool," Hadrian said with quiet intensity. "These children are treasures beyond measure. You don't even know them. I know they opened their home to a stranger in a storm. I know they have your kindness, your courage. That is enough." Hadrian looked at her, and Elena felt something shift in the air between them. "You are remarkable, Elena Foster. To raise such children alone, to remain soft in a hard world. That takes strength I have rarely seen, even in my long existence." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wasn't used to being looked at the way Hadrian was looking at her, like she was something worth studying, worth knowing. "I'm just doing my best. That is more than most can claim." A car horn sounded outside, and Hadrian glanced toward the window. My driver has arrived. Already? Elena felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Hadrian carefully extracted himself from between her sleeping sons, laying them gently against the couch cushions and pulling a blanket over their small forms. The tenderness in the gesture made Elena's eyes burn. She walked him to the door, hyper-aware of the space between them, the impossible situation she'd found herself in. At the threshold, Hadrian paused. "May I return?" he asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question. "I know I have no right to ask. I'm a creature of darkness, and you are light itself. But your sons, they made me feel something I thought dead. And you." He reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself. "You make me wish I were still human enough to deserve such grace." Elena's heart hammered in her chest. This was insane. He was a vampire, a king, something ancient and dangerous. But she thought of the way he'd held her sons, the sorrow in his eyes when he spoke of his own children, the careful loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. "Tuesday," she said. "Come for dinner on Tuesday. The boys would love to see you again." Hadrian's eyes widened fractionally, and for a moment she saw hope flash across his face, raw and stunning. "Tuesday," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I will be here." He stepped out into the snow, which had lightened to gentle flurries. Before he reached the black car waiting in her driveway, he turned back. "Elena Foster, you may have just saved something I thought beyond salvation. For that, I am eternally in your debt." Then he was gone, sliding into the car that pulled away silently into the night. Elena stood in her doorway, watching until the taillights disappeared, wondering what she'd just agreed to. She carried her sons to bed one by one, tucking them in and kissing their foreheads. Marcus stirred when she smoothed his hair. "Is the prince coming back?" he mumbled sleepily. "Yes, baby, on Tuesday." "Good. I like him." "Me too," Elena whispered, and realized with a start that she meant it. The next 3 days passed in a strange haze. Elena went through her normal routine, working her shifts at the hospital where she was a nurse, picking up the boys from school, making dinner, helping with homework. But her mind kept drifting to pale eyes and a sad, beautiful face, to impossible confessions and the weight of centuries in a single gaze. She told herself she was being ridiculous. He probably wouldn't even come. Why would a vampire king, of all things, want to spend time with a single mother and her 2 young sons? It had been a strange moment, nothing more. But Tuesday evening found her cooking her best lasagna, cleaning the house, wearing a dress instead of her usual jeans and sweater. The boys had been bouncing with excitement ever since she told them Hadrian was coming for dinner. "Do you think he'll tell us about being a prince?" Daniel asked for the 5th time, pressing his nose against the window to watch for cars. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll have to ask him politely." "Do princes live in castles?" Marcus wanted to know. "Some do, I think." The knock came at exactly 6 o'clock, as precise as everything else about Hadrian Greymorn. Elena smoothed her dress, took a breath, and opened the door. If possible, he looked even more striking than she remembered. He wore all black this time, making his pale hair and skin seem to glow. But it was his expression that stopped her breath. When he looked at her, something in his face softened, and she realized with a jolt that he was genuinely glad to see her. "Elena," he said, and her name in his ancient accented voice made something flutter in her chest. "Thank you for allowing me to return." "Thank you for coming." She stepped back to let him in, and immediately both boys were there, grabbing his hands, pulling him toward the living room with a barrage of questions. Hadrian went with them, and Elena watched as he folded his tall frame onto the floor where they directed him, letting Daniel show him his collection of toy cars while Marcus brought out his favorite books. "The Vampire King," she thought, with slightly hysterical amusement, "sitting cross-legged on my living room floor while my 5-year-old explains the difference between race cars and monster trucks." She served dinner, and Hadrian sat at her small table, looking impossibly elegant in her modest dining room. She'd made a plate for him, though she wasn't sure if he could eat normal food. "I can consume human food," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "I do not need to, but I am capable. It provides no nourishment but the act of sharing a meal." He looked at her sons, who were chattering happily about their day at school. I had forgotten how pleasant it could be. They ate, and Elena found herself relaxing as the evening progressed. Hadrian answered the boys' questions with patience and even occasional humor. Yes, he had lived in castles. No, he did not have a crown. Yes, he was very old. No, he could not fly, but he could move very quickly. Yes, he was strong. No, he did not sparkle. That is a modern invention, he said dryly when Daniel asked about the sparkling. I assure you, vampires do not glitter. We burn in sunlight, which is far less romantic. Does it hurt? Marcus asked with concern. Very much, but there are ways to manage. Covered vehicles, underground passages. My kind have adapted to survive in the modern world. After dinner, Elena started cleaning up, and Hadrian appeared beside her at the sink with the dishes before she could protest. You don't have to, she said. I am aware. I wish to. He began washing with the same precise care he seemed to apply to everything. Your sons are extraordinary, Elena. You should be proud. I am. She dried the plates he handed her, hyper-aware of how close they were standing, how the smallest movement would bring them into contact. They like you. They don't warm up to people quickly, usually. Their father leaving made them cautious. Their father is still a fool. Hadrian's voice had an edge to it now. To abandon such gifts. Why did you really come back? Elena asked softly. And please don't tell me it's just about the boys. Hadrian was quiet for a long moment, his hands stilling in the soapy water. I am old, Elena. So old that most days I feel every year like a weight pressing down on me. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched everyone I knew when I was human turn to dust. I have ruled my kind with absolute authority for centuries, and I have been utterly alone for all of it. When I left your home Saturday night, I felt something I have not felt since my mortality. Hope. The possibility that perhaps existence could be more than mere survival. Elena's throat tightened. You barely know us. I know enough. He turned to face her, and she was caught by the intensity in his eyes. I know that in one evening, your children made me laugh for the first time in decades. I know that you looked at me, knowing what I am, and chose kindness over fear. I know that when I am here, in this small house with its warm lights and its laughter, I feel less like a monster and more like the man I was before darkness claimed me. Hadrian, she breathed, and then his hand was cupping her face, cool and gentle, and she was leaning into the touch without meaning to. I should not have come back, he said, but he didn't move away. This cannot end well. I am what I am, and you deserve someone who can give you a normal life, who can stand beside you in daylight, who does not carry centuries of blood on his hands. But Elena Foster, I find I am selfish enough not to care. Tell me to leave, and I will. Tell me you do not want this, whatever this is, and I will disappear from your life. But if there is any part of you that feels what I feel it, Elena whispered. I don't understand it, but I feel it. Mommy, Hadrian, come look, Daniel's voice called from the living room, breaking the moment. Marcus built a castle with his blocks. Hadrian let his hand fall, but his eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer. We should go see this castle. Yes. Elena tried to steady her breathing. We should. The castle was impressive for a 7-year-old's work, and Hadrian praised it with genuine appreciation. They spent the rest of the evening playing, and Elena watched as the ancient vampire king helped her sons build an entire kingdom out of blocks, telling them stories of real castles he'd lived in, making them giggle with descriptions of grand balls and dramatic court intrigue. When it was time for the boys to go to bed, both of them insisted Hadrian help tuck them in. Will you come back? Marcus asked, gripping Hadrian's hand. If your mother permits it, yes. I permit it, Elena said from the doorway, and Hadrian's grateful glance made her heart race. She walked him to the door again, and this time, when he paused on the threshold, she was the one who reached out, touching his hand. Come whenever you want, she said. Really? The boys love having you here, and She took a breath. I want to know you better, Hadrian Greymorn. I want to understand this thing between us. Hadrian turned his hand to link his fingers with hers, cool skin against warm. I am yours to know, Elena. All of me, the darkness and the few remaining bits of light. I will hide nothing from you. Good. Then come to dinner again. Thursday? Thursday, he agreed. And Elena, thank you, for seeing beyond the monster. I don't think you're a monster, she said firmly. I think you're someone who's been hurt and alone for far too long. That's different. She watched him leave again, and when she went to bed that night, she dreamed of winter eyes and gentle hands and the possibility of something that should have been impossible. Hadrian came on Thursday, and the following Monday, and that Friday. Each visit followed a similar pattern: dinner, playing with the boys, quiet conversations with Elena after the children were asleep. They talked for hours those evenings, learning each other's stories. Elena told him about her marriage, the gradual realization that her husband had never wanted the reality of family, only the idea of it, about the struggle of making it alone, the fear that she wasn't enough. "You are more than enough," Hadrian told her fiercely. "You are everything." He shared pieces of his impossibly long life, the horror of his turning, killed by a vampire lord during the plague while trying to find medicine for his dying sons, waking as a creature of darkness to find his human family cold in their beds, lost while he'd been transforming. The centuries of rage and grief that followed, the slow accumulation of power until he'd challenged and defeated the old king, claiming the throne of their kind, because he was the strongest and no longer cared if he lived or died. "I thought making myself powerful enough that nothing could hurt me would ease the pain," he said one evening while they sat on her back porch, watching the stars. The boys were asleep inside. It did not. It only made me more isolated, more removed from anything resembling life. "What changed?" Elena asked. She sat close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, aware of the cool radiating from his body, the absolute stillness that came over him when he wasn't making an effort to seem human. "Your sons knocked that careful isolation aside, as if it were nothing," Hadrian said. "They looked at me with joy and curiosity, not fear. They wanted to hold my hand, to show me their treasures, to share their world with me. Do you understand what that means to someone who has been viewed as a monster for 7 centuries? They gave me back a piece of my humanity I thought lost forever." "And me?" Elena asked quietly. "Why me?" Hadrian turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You are brave and kind and achingly beautiful. You work yourself to exhaustion caring for others at the hospital, then come home and give everything you have left to your sons. You invited a creature of nightmares into your home because the alternative was leaving him in the cold. You looked at the king of vampires and saw a person worth knowing. How could I not fall in love with you?" The words hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect. Elena's heart hammered so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Is that what this is?" she whispered. "Love?" "For me, yes. Entirely, completely, irrevocably, yes." Hadrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I loved my human wife, the mother of my children. But that was 700 years ago, and this... Elena, this is consuming. You have become the center of my world in a matter of weeks. You and your sons. When I am not here, I count the hours until I can return. When I'm here, I wish time would stop so I never have to leave. I dream, though vampires rarely dream, and in those dreams I see a life where I deserve you, where I can be what you need." "What I need," Elena said, turning toward him fully, "is honesty, loyalty, someone who will love my sons and protect them and stay even when things get hard. Can you be that person, Hadrian?" "I can be that person," he said. "I will be that person. Elena Foster. I have survived 7 centuries of darkness. I have conquered and ruled and built an empire in shadow, but I have never wanted anything the way I want this life with you. I will protect you and your children with everything I am. I will never leave unless you send me away. This I swear." Elena closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home and leaping off a cliff all at once. Hadrian went rigid with surprise, then his hand came up to cup the back of her head, kissing her with a gentleness that spoke of how desperately he was holding himself back. When they broke apart, Elena was breathing hard. Hadrian looked stunned, his pale eyes wide and wondering. "I love you too," Elena said. "I don't know how it happened so fast, and maybe I'm crazy, but I love you. The real you, vampire king and all." Hadrian made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in existence. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped together under the stars, and Elena felt something settle in her chest, something right and true and permanent. The next 2 months passed in a blur of happiness Elena had never expected to find. Hadrian became a constant presence in their lives. He came for dinner most evenings, played with the boys, took them to parks and museums on weekends when he could move around safely under heavy clothing and sunscreen that helped mitigate, though not eliminate, the sun's effects for short periods. He was patient with their questions, gentle with their emotions, everything a father should be. Marcus started calling him Dad without either of them suggesting it. Elena was reading the boys' bedtime stories when Marcus turned to Hadrian, who was sitting on the edge of Daniel's bed, and said simply, "Good night, Dad." Hadrian froze. Elena saw emotion crash across his face, centuries of grief and loss and desperate longing. Then, he carefully gathered Marcus into his arms, holding him close. "Good night, my son," he whispered, voice rough. "Sleep well." Daniel immediately wanted the same treatment, and Hadrian held both boys, and Elena saw tears on his pale cheeks, crystalline and shimmering in the dim light. She ached for him, for all those centuries of missing his children, and felt grateful beyond words that her sons could give him this gift. After the boys were asleep, Hadrian pulled her into his arms in the hallway. "Thank you," he said against her hair. "Thank you for letting me love them, for letting them love me." "They're lucky to have you," Elena said fiercely. "We all are." With her, Hadrian was tender and patient, courting her with an old-world grace that made her feel cherished. He brought her flowers that bloomed at night, rare and beautiful. He wrote her letters in flowing script on heavy paper, poetry and declarations that made her cry. He held her and kissed her with barely restrained passion, always careful, always controlled, aware of his own strength. "I want you," he told her one evening when things had gotten heated on the couch after the boys were asleep. "I want you with an intensity that frightens me. But I am very strong, Elena, and I would die before I hurt you. So we will go slowly. We will go at your pace." "And if my pace is not that slow?" Elena asked, running her fingers through his silver hair, marveling at the texture of it. Hadrian's eyes darkened with want. "Then we will still be careful. Always careful. You are too important to risk." Things were beautiful and perfect, and Elena should have known it couldn't last. The first crack came when one of the nurses at the hospital mentioned seeing her with Hadrian at a restaurant. "That was your boyfriend? Girl, he is gorgeous, but is he sick? He looks so pale." "He has a condition," Elena said quickly. "Makes him sensitive to sunlight." That makes sense. Well, he looks at you like you hung the moon. Hold on to that one." The second crack came when Marcus's teacher asked to speak with her after school. "Marcus has been telling the other children that his new dad is a vampire king," the teacher said with an indulgent smile. "It's very creative, but we wanted to make sure everything is all right at home. No scary movies or age-inappropriate content?" "No, nothing like that," Elena said, feeling her face heat. "He just has a very active imagination. I'll talk to him about keeping fantasy and reality separate." "That would be great, though I have to say his writing has improved tremendously since this Vampire King character appeared in his life. Whatever game you're playing is working wonders." The real crack came 3 months into their relationship, when Hadrian arrived at her door earlier than usual one evening, his face grim. "We need to talk," he said, and Elena's stomach dropped. She sent the boys to play in their room and sat with him on the couch. "What's wrong?" "My court is growing restless," Hadrian said carefully. "I have been neglecting my duties, spending all my time here. There are vampires who see this as weakness, who question my authority. And more than that, there are those who have learned about you and the boys." Elena's blood ran cold. "Are we in danger?" "Not while I live," Hadrian said fiercely. "But Elena, my world is not a safe one. There are vampires who would hurt you to get to me, who would use you and your children as leverage. I have kept you as secret as possible, but secrets cannot last forever, not when the Vampire King himself is seen walking in daylight hours courting a human woman." "So what are you saying?" Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. "I am saying I was selfish to think I could have this, that I could have you and keep you safe. The logical solution is for me to step away, to return to my duties, to let you live your life without the danger my presence brings." "No." The word came out sharp and hard. "Absolutely not." Hadrian looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Elena, you do not understand the risk." "I understand perfectly. You think leaving will protect us, but Hadrian, if your enemies already know about us, you leaving won't erase that knowledge. It'll just leave us vulnerable without you here to protect us. Elena grabbed his hands, holding tight even though his skin was cool enough to make her shiver. The boys love you. I love you. You don't get to make this decision alone. I cannot bear the thought of you being hurt because of me. And I cannot bear the thought of losing you because you're too scared to fight for us. Elena held his gaze. You said you've survived 7 centuries. You've conquered and ruled and built an empire. Is the Vampire King really going to run away from a threat? Or is he going to stand and defend what's his? Something shifted in Hadrian's expression, the ancient predator rising to the surface. You are asking me to bring you into a war, Elena. I'm asking you to let us stand with you in one. She squeezed his hands. Look, I'm not an idiot. I know this is dangerous. But running and hiding isn't the answer. What if there's another way? What if instead of you leaving your world, or us living in ignorance, you actually integrate us into your life properly? Make it clear we're under your protection. Let your court know that anyone who threatens us threatens you directly. Hadrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something that might have been a smile curved his lips. Not a full smile, but closer than she'd ever seen from him. You are remarkable. Most humans would be begging me to erase their memories and disappear. You are proposing to march into vampire society and dare them to challenge us. Pretty much, yes. It could work, Hadrian said slowly. If I claim you properly, publicly, make you and the boys part of my official court, it would be unprecedented. But I am king. My word is law. Any vampire who moved against you would be committing treason. So do that. Claim us. Elena, you do not know what you are asking. To be claimed by a vampire, especially by the Vampire King, it is not a simple thing. It would mean binding your life to mine, living partially in my world. You and the boys would be under constant scrutiny. You would need guards, protection. Your freedom would be limited. My freedom is already limited, Elena pointed out. I'm a single mother working double shifts to keep us afloat. If being claimed by you means my sons are safe and I don't have to work myself to death, I'll take that trade. You would not have to work at all, Hadrian said. I have wealth beyond measure, accumulated over centuries. I have estates, properties, investments. Everything I have would be yours. I want to keep working, Elena said. I love being a nurse, but maybe not quite so many hours. And Hadrian? I want to marry you. Really marry you. I don't care about vampire politics, though. I'll deal with them. I want you to be my husband and the boy's father in every way that matters. Hadrian made that sound again, the one caught between laughing and crying. He pulled her into his lap, holding her so carefully, his face buried against her neck. You humble me, he whispered. You undo me. Yes, Elena Foster, I will marry you. I will claim you before my court and before the human world. I will be a father to your sons in every way, and I will spend every night for the rest of your life making sure you never regret choosing a monster like me. You're not a monster, Elena said fiercely, pulling back to frame his face with her hands. You're the man I love, the man who plays blocks with my sons and writes me poetry and holds me like I'm something precious. That's who you are. Hadrian kissed her then, and this time there was less control in it, more need, more raw emotion. When they broke apart, Elena was dizzy with it. When? She asked. The formal claiming should happen soon, within the week if you are certain. We will go to my court, to the great hall beneath the city. I will present you and the boys before the assembled vampires. They will witness my claim, and then you will be untouchable, mine in the eyes of our laws. And the human wedding? Whenever you wish. Tomorrow, if you would have me. Elena laughed. Let's do the vampire thing first, make sure we're all going to survive this. Then we'll plan a proper wedding. Something beautiful for the boys to remember. As you wish. Hadrian hesitated. Elena, there is something else. The boys. They should know the truth about what I am, what this means. They are young, but they are smart. They deserve honesty. I know. Elena had been thinking about this for weeks, wondering how to explain. Let's tell them together. Now. They called Marcus and Daniel into the living room, and both boys came bounding in, immediately climbing onto Hadrian's lap as if it were their God-given right. He settled them with the ease of long practice, one arm around each small body. Boys, Elena started, then stopped, unsure how to begin. We need to tell you something important, Hadrian said, and his voice was gentle but serious enough that both children looked at him with attention. Do you remember when we talked about me being very old? About how I am different from other people? Because you're a vampire, Marcus said matter-of-factly. Elena blinked. You knew? Mom, we're not stupid, Marcus said with 7-year-old dignity. Hadrian doesn't eat much. He's super pale. He's cold all the time. He doesn't come out in daytime except when it's cloudy. And he told us vampires are real that first night when Daniel asked if he sparkled. You're really not scared? Hadrian asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question. Why would we be scared of our dad? Daniel asked, snuggling closer. You're nice. You play with us and read us stories and make Mom smile. Who cares if you're a vampire? Hadrian closed his eyes, and Elena saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. I love you both so much, he said roughly, more than I have words to express. We love you too, Dad, Marcus said simply. Well, that went easier than expected, Elena said with a slightly hysterical laugh. Okay, so here's what's happening. Hadrian and I are going to get married. Yes, Daniel shouted, punching the air. Finally, Marcus said with deep satisfaction, and before that we need to go meet some other vampires, Hadrian's people. It might be a little scary, but we'll all be together and Hadrian will keep us safe, okay? Will they have fangs? Daniel asked with fascination. Yes, Hadrian said, and some of them will look very intimidating. But you must remember, I am their king. They will not dare to harm or even frighten you, not with me there. You have nothing to fear. Cool, Marcus said. When do we go? Hadrian and Elena exchanged glances, and she saw the wonder in his eyes, the disbelief that this could be so simple, that her children could accept the impossible with such grace. Saturday night, Hadrian said. We will go Saturday night. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Hadrian brought them clothes for the court visit, elegant things that made the boys look like little princes, and Elena feel like royalty herself. He explained the protocols, how to behave, who would be there. His second-in-command, Lucian, would be present, the High Council, various court members and nobles. They will test you, Hadrian warned. Try to intimidate to see if you are worthy of being at my side. Ignore them. You need only remember that you are mine, and I am the law. No one touches what belongs to the king. What about the boys? Elena asked. Will they try to scare them? If they do, I will make an example of them that will be remembered for centuries, Hadrian said, and his voice carried the cold edge of absolute authority. Your sons are under my protection. They might as well be my blood-born heirs. Anyone who threatens a hair on their heads commits treason against the crown. Saturday evening came too quickly. Hadrian arrived in a limousine driven by a vampire named Soren, who nodded respectfully to Elena and smiled with genuine warmth at the boys. My king speaks of you all constantly, Soren said. He is besotted, truly. We have not seen him like this in all the centuries I have served him. How long have you known him? Elena asked as they drove through the city. 400 years, give or take. I was turned during a war, left to die. Hadrian found me, brought me into his court, gave me purpose. He is a good king, a just king, sometimes harsh, but always fair. You need not fear this night, lady. The court will see what we all see, that you have given our king something precious. They will honor that. They drove to what looked like an abandoned cathedral on the outskirts of the city. But Hadrian led them inside and down, through hidden passages that descended deep beneath the earth. The air grew cooler, and Elena held tight to her son's hands, aware of Hadrian just ahead of them, his presence a shield between them and the darkness. They emerged into a vast underground hall that took Elena's breath away. It looked like something from another century, all soaring ceilings and Gothic architecture, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows across stone walls. Vampires filled the space, dozens of them, all with that same pale, otherworldly beauty. They turned as Hadrian entered, and the noise of conversation died away. Hadrian stood taller, his entire demeanor shifting. This wasn't the gentle man who played blocks with her sons. This was the vampire king, ancient and powerful and absolutely commanding. He held out his hand, and Elena stepped forward to take it. The boys pressed close to her sides. My court, Hadrian said, his voice carrying through the hall with unnatural clarity. I present to you Elena Foster and her sons, Marcus and Daniel. They are mine by choice and claim. Anyone who harms them, threatens them, or shows them anything but the deepest respect will answer to me personally. Is this understood?" A murmur ran through the assembled vampires. Elena saw surprise, calculation, and in some faces disapproval. But no one spoke against it. A vampire stepped forward, tall and elegant with hair like spun gold. "My king, this is unprecedented. To claim humans, especially children, to bring them into court, there will be consequences." "Then we will face them, Lucian," Hadrian said. "I am not asking for permission. I am informing you of what is. Elena will be my wife. Her sons will be my heirs. This is not negotiable." "The children cannot rule," another vampire said, a woman with sharp features. "They are human. They will age and die. How can they be heirs?" "That is my concern, not yours, Seraphina," Hadrian said coldly. "And if you are implying what I think you are implying, watch your next words very carefully." Elena felt tension crackle through the room. She understood what they were dancing around. The only way for her sons to truly be Hadrian's heirs would be to turn them eventually, to make them vampires. The thought made her sick, but she also understood it was a conversation for another day. "I am not asking you to like this," Hadrian continued. "I am telling you it is reality. You have all served under my rule for centuries. You know I am neither weak nor sentimental. But these humans have given me something I thought lost forever. They have reminded me why we survive, what we fight to protect. They will be honored in this court, or there will be a reckoning. Choose your positions wisely." Lucian was the first to kneel, dropping to one knee with his fist over his heart. "I stand with my king. I welcome his chosen and her children." One by one, the other vampires followed suit, kneeling in a wave of pale bodies and dark clothing. Elena felt tears sting her eyes at the sight, at the power of the moment. Hadrian squeezed her hand. "Rise," he commanded, and they did. "We will celebrate this union properly. But first, there is the formal binding. Elena, are you willing?" "I am," she said clearly. Hadrian drew a small knife from his belt, the blade gleaming silver in the candlelight. "By our oldest laws, a claiming requires blood. I will take yours, you will take mine, and the bond will be sealed. It will not turn you, not from so little, but it will connect us. You will be able to sense me, and I you. You will heal faster, live longer. And you will be marked as mine in ways every vampire will recognize. Do you consent?" "I consent," Elena said, though her heart raced. "And the boys?" Hadrian looked at Marcus and Daniel, who watched with wide eyes. "I will not force this on them. They are too young to make such a choice." "I want to," Marcus said. "If it keeps us safe, if it makes us really yours, I want to." "Me too," Daniel agreed. "A smaller bond then," Hadrian said. "Not a full claiming, but enough. A mark of protection." He looked at Elena. "You first." He drew the knife across his palm and dark blood welled up. Then he took Elena's hand, making a small cut on her finger. He pressed their wounds together, and Elena gasped as something electric passed between them. Power, old and vast, rushing through her veins. Hadrian's eyes glowed briefly, an inhuman shine, and she felt him in her mind, in her heart, a presence settling deep. "Mine," Hadrian whispered, "now and always." "Yours," Elena agreed, and meant it with everything she was. He did the same with the boys, smaller cuts, briefer contact. But she saw the way they both shivered as the connection formed, the way Hadrian's expression softened with absolute devotion. "It is done," he announced to the court. "The bond is sealed. They are mine, and I am theirs. This court will protect them as they would protect me. This is my decree." A cheer went up, surprising Elena with its genuine warmth. Maybe they didn't all approve, but they respected their king enough to honor his choice. Hadrian led them to a dais at the far end of the hall, settling them on thrones that felt ridiculously grand. But the boys loved it, perching on their seats with delight. Vampires approached throughout the evening to offer their respects. Some were kind, genuinely happy for their king. Others were more reserved, clearly uncertain about humans in their midst. But all of them were respectful. And by the end of the night, Elena felt less terrified and more cautiously optimistic. "You did wonderfully," Hadrian told her as they drove home, the boys already asleep against her sides. You were regal and graceful, everything a queen should be. I'm not a queen, Elena protested. You are, though. The Vampire King's chosen is queen by default, whether we use the title or not. You will need to learn to accept that, my love. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the cool strength of him, the bond humming between them like a living thing. As long as we're together, I can accept anything. 3 weeks later, they were married in a small ceremony with Elena's family and a few close friends present. The boys served as ring-bearers, beaming with pride in their tiny suits. Hadrian wore all white for the occasion, looking like some fairy tale prince, and when he saw Elena in her wedding dress, she watched his careful control crack completely. You are breathtaking, he said, taking her hands at the altar, radiant, perfect. They exchanged vows, human vows full of love and promise, and when the officiant said Hadrian could kiss his bride, he did so with a tenderness that made everyone in attendance sigh. Elena felt complete in a way she never had before, as if all the scattered pieces of her life had finally clicked into place. The reception was simple, held in her backyard under strings of lights. Hadrian danced with her, then with both boys, and Elena watched with tears in her eyes as her sons laughed with absolute joy in the arms of the vampire who had become their father. Thank you, she whispered to him later when they had a moment alone, for choosing us, for staying even when it was hard. Thank you for teaching me how to live again, Hadrian replied, for reminding me that existence can be more than duty and darkness. You have given me everything, Elena, everything. They moved into Hadrian's estate a month after the wedding, a sprawling property outside the city with enough land that the boys could play safely, protected by vampire guards who patrolled the perimeter. It was strange at first, adjusting to the space, the luxury, the reality of living with a vampire king. But Hadrian made it easy, involving Elena in every decision, making sure she felt it was her home too. The boys thrived. They had their own wing of the house, playrooms and bedrooms decorated exactly how they wanted. Hadrian hired tutors to homeschool them, ensuring they got the best education while staying safe. But more than that, he gave them attention and love, playing with them every evening, reading to them, teaching them things he'd learned over centuries of existence. Elena watched him transform over the months. The cold, closed-off vampire who had knocked on her door in a snowstorm gradually became someone warmer, more open. He smiled more, small expressions that were still rare but growing more frequent. He laughed at the boys' antics. He held Elena in the night and whispered his love for her in a dozen languages. I feel almost human again, he told her one evening, lying in their bed with her curled against his side. Not in body, but in soul. As if you have breathed life back into the dead parts of me. You were never dead, Elena said, just sleeping, waiting for the right people to wake you up. There were still challenges, of course. Some vampires in the court continued to resist the idea of humans being so elevated. There were threats, attempts to undermine Hadrian's authority, but he dealt with them swiftly and decisively, making it clear that his position was not up for negotiation. Elena and the boys were untouchable, and anyone who forgot that learned otherwise quickly. Elena continued working at the hospital, though she reduced her hours dramatically. She loved her patients, loved making a difference, but now she had more time for her family, and that felt like the greatest gift of all. Her co-workers still asked about her pale husband, and she told them he had a rare condition that made him sensitive to light. Most accepted it without question, and the few who suspected something stranger kept their theories to themselves. One evening, about 6 months after the wedding, Elena was giving Daniel a bath when he asked, "Mom, will Hadrian turn us into vampires when we grow up?" Elena's hands stilled in his hair. "What makes you ask that, baby?" "I heard some of the vampires talking at the court last week. They said if we're really going to be heirs, we'll have to be turned eventually. I don't really know what that means, but it sounds important." Elena took a breath, thinking carefully about her answer. Turning means becoming a vampire, like Hadrian. It means you would stop aging, stop being human. It's a very big decision, and it's not one you have to make for a very long time. Would it hurt? I don't know, sweetheart. Probably. But Hadrian would make sure you were as safe as possible. Would I still be me? That's a good question. Elena rinsed his hair, buying time. I think so. You'd still have all your memories, your personality. You'd just be different in some ways, stronger, faster, needing blood to survive. Daniel thought about this seriously. I think I might want to do it, when I'm older, if it means I can stay with Dad forever. Elena's throat tightened. Let's talk about it more when you're older, okay? You have years and years to decide. She brought it up with Hadrian that night, after the boys were asleep. Daniel asked me about being turned. Hadrian went very still. Did he? Some of your court members have been talking where the boys can hear, about them being heirs, about what that would mean. I will address it, Hadrian said grimly. They should not be burdening children with such heavy concepts. But it's a fair question, isn't it? Elena sat beside him, taking his hand. If they're really going to be your heirs, if they're going to grow up in vampire society, at some point we'll have to face this decision. I will never force them, Hadrian said fiercely. Never. I have lived with the horror of being turned against my will, waking to find everything I loved dead. I would not inflict that on them. I know. But what if they choose it, when they're old enough to really understand what it means? Hadrian was quiet for a long time. If they choose it, as adults, with full understanding of the consequences, then I would turn them myself. I would make sure the transition was as painless as possible, that they were surrounded by love and safety. But Elena, I would wait as long as possible. Let them live as humans first. Experience everything life has to offer before making such a permanent choice. What about me? Elena asked softly. Have you thought about that? Hadrian turned to her, his eyes intense. Every day, you will age, Elena. You will grow old while I remain frozen in time. The thought of losing you, of watching you fade, it is agony. But I also know that turning is not a gift I can give lightly. It is a choice you must make, and I will love you regardless of what you choose. I want to stay with you, Elena said. I want forever with you, Hadrian. But I also want to see my boys grow up, have families of their own if they choose. I want to live a full human life first. Can we have both? The bond we share will extend your life significantly, Hadrian said. You could easily live to be 150, 200 years old, more than enough time to see your children grown, to have grandchildren if that is what they choose. And then, if you still wish it, I will turn you. We will have eternity together. Elena kissed him, pouring all her love into it. That sounds perfect. Years passed in a blur of happiness Elena had never thought possible. Marcus and Daniel grew into fine young men, smart and kind and strong. They learned to navigate both the human and vampire worlds, equally comfortable at court functions and normal teenage activities. Hadrian was an extraordinary father, patient with teenage rebellion, supportive of their dreams, fiercely protective always. When Marcus turned 18 and started talking seriously about being turned, Elena and Hadrian sat him down for a long conversation about what it would mean. They made him wait 2 more years, letting him experience college first, letting him be sure. At 20, he made the choice, and Hadrian turned him with Elena holding their son's hand through the entire painful process. Daniel chose to wait longer, wanting to experience more of human life first. He went to medical school, became a doctor, like his mother had been a nurse. He married a woman he met during his residency, had 2 children. Only at 40, when his own children were grown, did he finally ask Hadrian to turn him. Elena watched her sons become vampires, watched them join Hadrian's court as true heirs, and felt peace with their choices. They had lived first, experienced humanity fully. Now they would have eternity to experience everything else. As for Elena, she stayed human for 60 more years, working at the hospital until her 70s, spending time with her grandchildren, living a full and beautiful life. Hadrian was beside her every step of the way, never aging, never changing, loving her through every stage. When she was 85 and her body was starting to fail, she told Hadrian it was time. I want forever with you now, she said. I've lived my human life. I'm ready for whatever comes next. Are you certain? Hadrian asked, cupping her face with hands that were still cool, still gentle after all these years. There is no going back once this is done. I've never been more certain of anything except marrying you in the first place." Hadrian turned her in their bedroom, surrounded by their sons and grandchildren, everyone she loved bearing witness. The pain was intense but brief, and when Elena woke 3 days later, the world was sharper, clearer, more vivid than she'd ever experienced. And she was strong, powerful, young again in body if not in soul. Hadrian was there when she opened her eyes, and the look on his face made everything worth it. Wonder and love and something like joy, pure and bright. "Hello, my love," he said softly. "Welcome to eternity." Elena sat up, marveling at how easy it was, how strong she felt. "Did it work? Am I really?" "You are magnificent," Hadrian said, pulling her into his arms. "Beautiful and powerful and mine forever now. How do you feel?" "Amazing, different, but still me." Elena looked around at her sons, both of them grinning with relief, at her grandchildren watching with awe. "I'm still me, just more." "Always more," Hadrian agreed. "Always everything." They had a celebration in the vampire court that night, presenting Elena as the official vampire queen. She stood beside Hadrian on the dais, wearing a gown of midnight blue that made her new pale skin glow, and felt complete in a way that transcended her previous understanding. This was where she was meant to be. Who she was meant to be. The years that followed were full of learning and adjustment. Elena had to master her new abilities, her new instincts. Hadrian taught her control, patience, how to navigate their world. Her sons helped, laughing at her mistakes, encouraging her victories. And slowly, she became truly comfortable in her new existence. She took on responsibilities in the court, working with the vampires to establish better relationships between their kind and humans. She used her medical knowledge to help vampires who were injured or struggling. She became a queen in truth, not just title, and the court grew to love and respect her. But the best moments were still the quiet ones, evenings spent with Hadrian, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing. Watching him with their sons, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren as the years stretched on. Seeing him smile, really smile, not the small, careful curves, but full expressions of joy. "You made me whole again," he told her one evening, centuries after that first meeting. They were on the balcony of their estate, watching the sunset. Elena could go out in daylight now with proper protection, one of the perks of being turned by the vampire king himself. "I was a shell before you, going through the motions of existence. You gave me purpose, love, family, everything that matters." "We saved each other," Elena said, leaning into his side. "I was drowning before you, struggling to survive alone. You gave me partnership, support, someone to share the burdens with. You loved my sons like they were your own. You made us all feel safe and cherished." "I love you, Elena Greymorn," Hadrian said, using the name she'd taken when she'd been turned. "I will love you for all the centuries to come, until the stars burn out and the world ends. You are my heart, my soul, my everything." "And you are mine," Elena said, "forever." They stood together as the last light faded from the sky, two immortals who had found each other against impossible odds. A vampire king who had forgotten how to smile, and a human woman who had reminded him what it meant to live. Together with the boys who had adored them both, they had built something beautiful and lasting. The cold stranger, who had knocked on her door in a snowstorm, had become her husband, her partner, the love of her eternal life. And the vampire king, who had walked the earth alone for 700 years, had finally learned how to smile again, surrounded by the family who loved him. In the end, that was the greatest magic of all. Not the immortality or the power or the supernatural abilities, but the simple, profound truth that love could transcend anything, even death itself. And they lived, truly lived, forever after.